So today we're going to be focused on setting smart goals that are aligned with your values, those values that we just clarified and committed to in the last step. Have we talked about smart goals before?
No, we have not.
So we should probably clarify.
So last time we talked about the importance of values, but what are SMART goals and why are they even relevant?
That's important because values are an abstract idea. They're like a direction that you can move in, but they're not an attainable goal. And that's one of the problems with values is that they're not easily actionable. And so that's where values sometimes get in our way because we're like, oh, I want to be a good person. I want to help people. I want to be a good husband. It's like, okay, great. Like, pat yourself on the back. Like, those are all wonderful values. And you could commit to it and say, it's really important to me to do, but that's not a plan. Like, okay, how are you going to do that? And that's where SMART goals come into play. They help us turn our values into action. Because if you just have these dreams and big commitments to your amazing values, like that's awesome, but that can sometimes lead to frustration when you don't have a plan in place to move you towards those values. So SMART goals are an acronym. The S stands for specific, measurable, actionable, reasonable, and timely. And they're a way of setting goals that are achievable and that you can actually put into practice.
So are you suggesting that when you create goals that are not aligned with your values, it's almost like you're setting yourself up for failure?
Oh, definitely. People set goals all the time that aren't aligned with their values just because we are told that it's good to set goals. And it actually is good to set goals because it engages the dopamine system and helps us stay focused and feel motivated and productive and filter out unnecessary distractions. And it feels good to accomplish things. The problem is that we also have these like more diffuse ideas, these abstract ideas of values of things that are important to us, these dreams that aren't fully tangible. And those can be frustrating because we're like, yeah, but how do I achieve those? And sometimes we're like, that's too difficult to figure out how to be a good person or to help other people or have an impact on the world. Oh, it's just easier to just focus on my goals. I'm going to get a promotion and I'm going to, you know, get more followers on social media. And like we just set goals because goals are helpful. But at the end of the day, if those goals aren't in line with your values, then they're taking you somewhere where you don't really want to go. But you'll go there because that's how the dopamine circuit in the brain evolved. And we can use it, but you're going to be constantly pulling against your own deeper motivations. I remember I went on a date once with this girl up in Malibu, and it chose this like romantic restaurant. And I was trying to be romantic. And so I asked her, like, so what are your dreams? And she replied, oh, I don't have dreams. I have goals. And like, needless to say, we weren't compatible. But like, this is one of the things that made me realize there's an important place for dreams and an important place for practical goals. And many people mix those up, that dreams and setting aside the practicalities of anything help you realize what is most important to you, what your values are. Like if there weren't all these obstacles, What would you dream of? And that is your limbic system, your emotional circuitry, your brain trying to tell you, hey, these things are really important to us. But oftentimes we just ignore those because we don't immediately have an answer for how to get there. And so, A, stop doing that. And then B, once you realize like what those dreams and values are, then you can create a plan. And that's where SMART goals come in, because many people set goals that aren't helpful. They might be in line with their values, so they're helpful in that sense, but they're not helpful as a goal. And they're not helpful in many, they can be unhelpful in many ways. One, you can set a goal for yourself that is too unattainable. You're like, oh, I want to write a best-selling book, so I'm going to write a best-selling book this year. Like, well, you could write a book this year, but you have no control over whether or not it is a bestseller. And so when you start making progress and you're writing a book and you're actually taking action, your brain can always be like, yeah, but is this a bestseller? And then, like, you demotivate yourself because you sort of set as part of your goal something that you don't actually have control over. Or sometimes we set goals that are so big that I don't actually believe that I can do. So whenever I think about the goal, I just get overwhelmed. And it's perfectly fine to have goals that aren't realistic. Those I would put more in the category of dreams. Like, I want to be a best-selling author. I want to make $1 billion company. Like, awesome. But the purpose of those kinds of dreams / goals is to inspire you. Mm-hmm. So if your goals and your dreams don't inspire you, then stop worrying about them. SMART goals help us connect our dreams or our big long-term goals into action in a way that engages the dopamine system.
Mm-hmm. I really like what you said about setting goals surrounding things that you actually have control over, because setting appropriate goals is like one part of actually achieving them. But even when we do that, even when we are able to set these SMART goals, how can we practice resilience when we don't end up meeting our goals?
That's a great question, because a lot of times people, especially smart, successful people, understand the value of goals, but they think that, like, the purpose of goals is to get mad at themselves or to criticize themselves for not meeting those goals. And that is where the next item on our cheat sheet comes into play, which is self-compassion. A lot of times people think that self-compassion is just lowering your standards. I mean, would you say that's the case? When you hear self-compassion, like, what do you think of?
I guess sometimes I think of like, oh, like when you're too self-compassionate to yourself, you're like a softie, you know, like you don't have the discipline that you require, or you don't have the tools that you need to achieve your goals, so you're just giving yourself the benefit of the doubt.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people feel that way. And the truth is that there are some things that it's reasonable to get mad at yourself about and like trying to kick your own butt over, and some things that is actually unreasonable to get mad at yourself for. What are those things? Kind of depends on what you have control over. This is why it's so important. Back in the previous episode, one of the most important things, actually the number one thing I say on the cheat sheet, is to accept your limitations. There are some things that you don't have control over. And when you criticize or get mad at yourself or punish yourself or get angry at yourself for things that you don't have control over, then you're just torturing yourself. You're not motivating yourself to do something. Like, it's just random punishment. Like, just imagine if you just got randomly punished at work or just got randomly yelled at in your relationships, like it demotivates you and depresses you. Uh, but we do it to ourselves sometimes because there are instances where getting mad at yourself or being critical of yourself is helpful. And we just overgeneralize and think that it's always helpful. But the things that are reasonable to get mad at yourself at are things that you have control over. Because if you get mad at yourself for things that you don't have control over, it actually allows your brain to evade accountability, right? Like imagine if you were having an argument with a friend or a partner and they like, well, you said that really mean thing, while you were sleeping. Okay, like I don't have control over that. It's like, well, I told you all that in, the voicemail I left you. And you're like, yeah, my phone died. I don't have my phone with me. Like when someone accuses you or tries to get angry of something that you don't have control over, you're like, oh, great. Like, I don't need to take responsibility for that. Like, there's nothing I could do about that. And that's what we sometimes do to ourselves is you're like, I can't believe you missed that deadline. I can't believe you made that typo or that mistake. It's like, it doesn't motivate you or make you excited about doing better in the future. And oftentimes you're like, then get to be like, oh yeah, well, look at that unreasonable a-hole. You're just talking about yourself. Yeah, like, great, congratulations. Like you can get angry at yourself and then nothing changes about your behavior. And then you get angry about yourself and criticize yourself, which you do for a very good reason. It actually reduces amygdala reactivity and it activates the nucleus accumbens reward circuit because it feels good and calming to have this sense of control over the world. Oh, I didn't follow through on my promises. But I can yell at myself about it. And it's like, oh, good. I didn't do it, but I punished myself. So we're even, Steven. It's like, okay, yeah, you could keep doing that, but that's not actually going to make you change your behavior. In order to actually hold yourself accountable, you have to forgive yourself for these things that you do not have control over. Otherwise, these things you do not have control over will overshadow the things you actually have control over. So if I said I was going to work on this project, or I was going to work on my book, or work on, programming something for 3 hours yesterday, and then I didn't, well, it's reasonable. Like, hey, buddy, you said you were going to do that thing, and then you didn't. But I can't go back and change the past. So like, it's true that I'm angry and annoyed at myself about what I didn't do previously, but like, I literally cannot change the past. All I can do is be more committed and promise to doing it now and in the future. The question that most people don't investigate or aren't curious about is like, well, why didn't you follow through on your previous promise? And a lot of times it's like, oh, well, you didn't set a SMART goal. So it's like you didn't have a specific time to do, you weren't specific enough or measurable. And so and you're still not doing that. So now you're just getting mad at yourself for not succeeding. But really, you should be getting mad at yourself that you never set yourself up for success. And now, don't just continue to get mad at yourself for not succeeding. Be curious as to why you didn't succeed. Put a plan in place that is measurable and actionable. And if you don't follow through in those steps, then you can question, like, are those good steps or unhelpful steps? Do they have control over those or not? And in the face of things that you have control over that are actionable right now, then it's reasonable to get mad at yourself and like kick your butt and be like, okay, stop, watching Netflix, like time to do this thing that we said we were going to do. But in the face of like all the mistakes you've made in the past, or the fact that the stuff you're working on right now might not be perfect, Well, those things you should treat yourself with compassion about, because yeah, it sucks that promised yourself these things, or and you didn't get them. And it sucks that like it's really important to you to reach these big goals and you might not reach them. And it is sometimes abstract to um, think of directing compassion towards ourselves. And that's why I often say, like, well, what would you say to someone that you care about or that you love if they were in the same situation? They're like, I'm scared that my company's going to fail. Would you be like, stop being scared? Just work harder. Like, you could do that. Many of us do, or we inadvertently invalidate the other person's feelings, or whatever. But like, you ideally, you can think about what your ideal friend or mentor would say to you, like, hey, I know it's scary, like, but it's really important to you, right? Like, to have this impact or whatever. Like, is there an easier way to do it? Like, no, I don't know of an easier way. Oh, yeah, well, yeah, it's scary. You're right. And I'm with you. And like, but like, where there's no way to avoid that fear entirely. And when you are scared, you could either then be mad at yourself for being scared, or like when you inevitably make a mistake, you could get mad at yourself for making a mistake. Okay, well, does that help you make more progress? Does that help you stay on track? If so, great, get mad at yourself. But many people are delusional and they think that getting mad at themselves or angry at themselves is helping them stay motivated and focused, when in fact, it is distracting them from actually making the progress that is important to them. Because self-compassion actually changes your brain activity and chemistry. One study looked at people who had chronic pain, and they had them do this really brief self-compassion intervention. And just from a short uh, practice of self-compassion, it actually measurably changed activity in the prefrontal cortex, specifically the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, which is really helpful in reframing or regulating our habits and impulses and emotions. And it also increased activity in a region called the insula, which is responsible for awareness of our body and what's going on. And like, normally what happens is that something happens in our body, like our heart rate goes up, or we feel a pain, or we feel a discomfort in our stomach, and then we start to become aware of it, but then that automatically triggers anxiety or habits, and so we don't actually become aware of it. So practicing self-compassion actually helps you be able to be more aware of what is happening, as well as strengthen the brain circuits that help you think about it from different perspectives.
So self-compassion is actually necessary for realizing how you can improve yourself.
Yeah, I think self-compassion is a huge part of realizing your full potential and unleashing all your capabilities. People think that self-compassion is the opposite of accountability.
Mm-hmm.
But holding yourself accountable, what most people think of as holding yourself accountable, is really just having a temper tantrum and punishing yourself for things that you can't control. And yeah, it sort of reduces amygdala reactivity in the moment, but nothing changes. And so you keep getting stuck in these same patterns. And so self-compassion is actually part of holding yourself accountable. You're not being compassionate to yourself just so that you can like lower your standards and like, whatever, I don't care about those things. No, you are being compassionate with yourself because those things are so important to you. And things that are important to us that aren't under our full control create strong emotions. And if you can't treat yourself with compassion in the face of those emotions, well, you're still going to have those emotions. And now you're just going to be angry at yourself for having those emotions. That's going to trigger other unhelpful habits and to make the emotions worse and the anxiety worse. And so while it might not always be automatic because it's not trained into your habit circuitry yet, you can say, hey, I know it's really difficult that I really tried really hard. And treat yourself with compassion so that you can actually hold yourself to the important goals that you have control over.
Thank you so much for informing us about SMART goals and about treating yourself with compassion.
It was great talking with you again today, and I hope people found that helpful. We're going to keep talking about some more mindset shifts, so stay tuned.